Hey everyone, welcome to the Pursuit of Profitability, the show where we get real about what it takes to scale, own outcomes, and drive results in today's finance landscape. I'm your host, Siddharth Sridharan, CEO and co-founder of Spendflo. Spendflo is a managed procurement platform where we help mid-market companies streamline their entire procurement process and make every dollar count. In this episode, we have Joe Aurilia, SVP of Operations at Cyware, where he's overseeing global operations and help the company scale and continue to help the company scale as well. Before we dive into operational architecture, scaling challenges, and your work at Cyware, I wanted to zoom out a bit. Joe, who were you before all of this? What were you up to before Cyware, outside the boardrooms, outside systems, playbooks? I'm curious about your personal and professional experiences that shape who you've become today.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Happy to have this conversation. Before this, actually, I had a few companies that I had owned, building those from scratch. Really, really love building and scaling companies, whether it's mine or someone else's. It's just kind of like a passion. And I kind of bring that back to growing and scaling, software, right? I actually started as a technologist, so computer scientist from training ages ago, not too many ages ago, I think. But, used to be an enterprise architect working on large scale system design, ordering workflow delivery, really trying to, automate the internals of very large enterprises and working with teams cross border, massive, project management activities and security and automation. So really that kind of mental thinking about, okay, we have a problem, we need to automate it for thousands and thousands of people. How do we make it work? How do we make it resilient? How do we make it reliable? And then somehow that's kind of morphed into that same thing, but instead of just pure technology, how do we do that by adding people and process to the mix, right? So that people component was a new part, which is part of, growing and building. And it's fun, you have more levers to play with, right? Your value proposition increases, you could do more things. And also working with people is a bit more enjoyable, right? You have conversations, you're seeing struggles, you're seeing people grow and move up. So it kind of just stemmed from technology is the short answer.
Nice. That's awesome. And were there any early moments in your career that really influence how you think about building operational foundations?
Yeah, I definitely think you have to kind of kick the tires a bit, right? Kind of see what works, what doesn't work. I think in the early days when you begin things and you have all that responsibility, the weight of the responsibility also kind of, especially for perfectionists, kind of you want to really make sure everything is perfect and you want to kind of have your hands on things and have opinions. And it's very important to be involved, right? You never stop that. But I think what you learn over time I think we're at a point in our life where we can admit it, is you have to let others make mistakes, right? If you don't, no one's going to grow, and then your company is not going to do well. So, learning to let go, learning to allow others to find their own journey, find their own path, work together, collaborate, and trust, I think is a big point. I think it really is allowing everyone to move up the ladder, to allow things to be accomplished. So it's really about just sharing, going back to those people elements. I talk about this, consistently, is that to me, it doesn't matter how much AI you add to the conversation. Until we all turn into robots, which is probably not going to happen. We're still here, right? We're not going anywhere, right? We can simply unplug the machine if we wanted to. So we're pretty important. You have to get the people to work, right? You have to get people to work together, to collaborate. I think that is something that you kind of hone in over
Any
time.
particular story or any particular like incident that really shaped you?
Oh boy. I think there was a point in the past where we may have tried in a previous entity to create too much technology ourselves. I think the technology was great. I think we're all still very proud of it. But it might have been the situation where you should have just bought it and move forward, because buying it would have allowed you to go accelerate faster, right? So even when I look at procurement and things today, yes, the sticker price might be a lot, and yes, you have to negotiate and everything, but what does that do for the company, right? Yes, it hits the books, and yes, it looks like a big number, but can I get somewhere 3 months faster, 6 months faster, 7 months faster? Can I get people to be more productive? Can I get people to be more efficient? Do I accomplish certain goals? Do I beat out a competitor in a faster time pace? Do I get something to market faster? Those have price tags that are invaluable compared to the cost of whatever you were buying. So just because you can do it yourself, there's no award for doing it yourself, right? There's no like slap on the back. There's no gold star next to your name. It really doesn't matter. If you're not to market on time, if you're not making, revenue from it, who built it is sort of irrelevant.
Yeah, that makes sense. For just a quick question on that as well, like for listeners who may not know what Cyware as well is, can you help me understand what the business is and what are the challenges that like unique to it right now?
Yeah, I mean, so Cyware is a cybersecurity company. It focuses on what's called threat intelligence, right? So people use terminology like a tip and SOAR. So, allowing usually large mature entities that have, decently sized security teams to manage their threat information, to bidirectionally share and enrich that data within the network of networks, and then to automate and orchestrate those details using, SOAR technology, really allowing them to move from the defensive posture from threats to an offensive posture, right? So allowing them to be more resilient, to more collaborative, and kind of minimize those silos within their organization from a security standpoint, as well as within the organizations and networks that they actually work with. So really kind of democratizing that threat intelligence.
Very nice. So when you joined Cyware, what were the real operational problems that you were solving for when you joined?
It was an interesting time. I remember, I was the first U.S. employee here, so that interview process is much different than what we do now. And the ask was simple: is that you're coming in. We have a very large team in India. They're doing a great job making the MVP. That's all great, but everything else is not there yet, right? So are you comfortable building everything from scratch? But by the way, please do it as fast as physically possible and as scalable as physically possible. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. So that's essentially the ask that we had. So I think the challenge is that when you're at that stage, everything you do, I don't want to say it's a problem, but it's well, we don't have it yet, right? So I would like to hire someone. Great. How do you hire someone? Oh, well, need a PEO. Oh, well, need paperwork, need agreements, need this. Oh, we need to have insurance. So everything becomes an I need, which is fine. It's part of the game, but you have to build it, right? So you have to get all those foundational elements up to make it easier. And then every time something changes, oh, I'd like to hire someone from Kansas, or I'd like to hire someone from Washington. Like we don't have access in those states. Like so everything is new. So you're kind of building, like these Lego blocks of the foundation of a company, right? And the question is, how fast can you build those blocks to keep up with the rest of the machine? And that's kind of like the fun little juggle that you do at that stage.
Very cool. It's interesting you say that. Like we did that with I think our director of sales was the first hire we made, and like same thing, like the PEO setting all of that up. It became like our head of finance, me and him, kind of figuring this all out as the first step. And one of the key pieces, right? Like there's the two most important processes in my view, like or three, I'd say, is like the entire hire to retire process inside a company as you scale, then the order to cash, and then there's the procure to pay. Right? Like for one of the key pieces that I'm guessing, like you're probably looking at all three at all points of time. And what did you do to set it up at Cyware from, and what are like the first couple of decisions that you made across, especially working with finance and operations to make sure that all of that is aligned?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of originally were intending to have like an actual office, right? But COVID kind of changed that a little bit. So, when you're in that remote fashion, you're not really able to communicate with everyone in the same kind of way. So all your systems have to be sort of resilient to a different
Mhm.
level, and that communication has to be there. So, getting control over expenses was very key. How do we ensure that we are not spending outside of our means? How do we ensure that we're buying the right stuff, that we need the stuff, that we can integrate it? So coming from the technology background and also coming from a, not liking to waste money background, that became something that we really kind of clicked on in terms of managing. So having a decent process from the beginning of, hey, when we want to do something, what does that look like? Can it work in the company? How much does it cost? Do we have the right paperwork? Kind of keeping a list of it and then maturing that over time, right? Kind of getting to, okay, well, now we have a more formal process. We're bringing in more teams. We have an expense management program. We have procurement processes and security and compliance, just kind of iteratively building that over time. But the crux of all that was ensuring that the DNA of the company understood you just don't go out and buy stuff, right? You just don't go out
Yeah.
and make your own decisions. There's got to be a time and a place for this purchase, and it has to fit within the company goals. And
Yeah.
that's more important than having it today. There has
Yeah.
to be, a reason behind it.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit more about like you've done something really interesting from a vendor management and like that workflows and all of everything around that, right? You set it up in such a way that you have visibility and control over it, which is like fairly rare, right, for a company of your size and scale. So like that's what piqued my interest. Can you walk me through like why you did it? What actually triggered you to kind of do that earlier than usual? What problems
Yep.
do you see, and any stories around that as well?
Yeah, I mean, so I've always been very security conscious, even before, working for a cybersecurity firm. So, starting with even your laptop deployments, right? Making sure that they're locked down, having an MDM, having a security policy. We always knew that we are obviously serving very, very important clients. So the future would have brought, our ISO or SOC 2 or FedRAMP just like it did. So it's all just part of the journey of, building things in a way that can be resilient, that can be compliance approved, right? You have to, in my opinion, coming back to the technology aspect, you have to do that from the start, right? You can try to bake in security afterwards, but it's very hard. And having had the opportunity to kind of get at that level here, ensuring that that was part of the process. So now when you're adding on software to the mix and services and contractors and all those type of activities, each one of those is now an additional vector or a bucket of potential concern. So how do you manage that potential concern? Meaning that you have the costing concern, you have the quantity, the scoping, the SOW, the compliance, the integration. How does it work in the enterprise? How do you bring them on, bring them off? How do you log it? How do you make that tie back to your SOC 2 and your automation? So all that was part of the thinking of each of those elements. So, we built an ITSM system. We had tracking and tracing on everything. We add each piece of software to a record. We understood the dates, the amounts, working closely with finance to understand, hey, can we do this? Can we not? What's it going to do if we buy X? Does it get rid of Y? Being very, very almost religious about seat counts, right? How many do you need? Not everyone in the company needs software X, right? Only 10% need it. So let's be resilient about that. Let's do that. Let's look at things every quarter. Do we need to shave something? Do we need to actually have this, or can we replace this? So really just having those questions allowed us to be critical about our spend and also ensure that each platform is doing what it needs. Is it fully integrating together? So I'm also a sales architect. I'm a huge proponent, of the platform in general, putting that in the middle, instantiating that when we came in and ensuring that all of our GTM systems also talk to that, right? So if I'm buying a GTM product, the question is going to be, well, how well does it integrate with Salesforce? How exactly does the data flow? Is it bidirectional? What's your security? What's your compliance? Because we want to bolt on new capabilities. We don't want to create tangential islands, right? So those islands are the scary thing. We want to bring things together so the information flows and the data is present. So at the end of the day, and a little nerdy, but that business intelligence is a key, right? You're buying these systems so you can eventually have intelligence later. Intelligence is built on the data. The data is only worthy if it's actually built in a system that can maintain it in a strong, reliable fashion.
Nice. And one of the key other key pieces you mentioned this as well. You start partnering with finance, and I'm guessing there was a journey where you're probably handling Salesforce already, but GTM tools are where like most of the spend happens, and like people like your demand teams, your sales teams, all of them are coming to you and be like, hey, we need this, we need that. Like, how do you actually manage all of that? So like, how did you set that up for success? And there's like, I know there's a story there on like how RevOps came to be at Cyware as well, right? Like, and how that evolution happened.
Yeah, I mean, your CEO and your CFO tend to, I think, or should be friends, and sometimes even the roles are kind of merged a bit, because operations is there to keep the wheels running and things, being operationalized in a logical, resilient fashion. But we're also relatively cost conscious. And finance, same thing, right? Obviously, they're looking at the books and making sure all the numbers are right, metric, KPIs, all the type of activities. So partnering together is really key because they're going to bring in that financial due diligence and that, integrity from that point of view. Whereas we can bring in more of that technology aspect, right? And working together to partner to make decisions. So
Mm.
it's not just us saying, hey, we're buying this. It's we're working together. Okay, well, we're buying this because we're going to reduce this kind of spend, or this fully weighted cost of this employee is X. By doing this, we kind of make that person like 1.2. So let's look at how that kind of changes your numbers. So really migrating and changing the conversation from an I need technology, right? Which we all need technology, but an I need or
Yeah.
I want to a this is the financial value it provides to the organization, which then obviously makes all their ears sing. We're on the same page, we're communicating, and then we're working together to kind of make those changes. To your RevOps point, we had separate teams in the past, right? We all kind of started somewhere else, and RevOps as a term has been sort of maturing over
Yeah.
time. So in the early days, you had your deal desk, your more formal structure there, your Salesforce ops, your marketing ops, that type of deal. But it has seemed prudent to really have an internal rebranding because the power of that felt more important than the fact that the work was going to be sort of similar.
Mm.
And we talked together, we kind of, rationalized what we wanted to do. We created our own game plan about, hey, how could this transform the organization? We stacked hands, we made the business case, we eventually got that approved. And that has been phenomenal for us, right? We've moved from a team, actually, the work has changed. So you move from a team that is doing specific tasks in your GTM systems to a team that is now reporting on the data from GTM systems, driving pipeline meetings, driving reporting meetings, working across the stack to say, look, you might look at RevOps and say, oh, they're the Salesforce people, the HubSpot people, right? Now we're
Mm-hmm.
also working on, how do we get product to talk to licensing, or how do we get marketing to collaborate with product? How do we get things to get out from a contractual point of view, bringing all those elements together because they all are friction points within your revenue engine, and trying to fix all those things to make them faster or better for a client is really now the name of the game. So the
Yeah.
work they can do is way more impactful.
Yeah, makes sense. And did you you've probably done a bunch of like post-acquisition integration work, right? Like, and you've done this across your enterprise architecture. You're an enterprise architect. There's a lot of nuances in that role, and not a lot of people like necessarily understand that. Hey, when you have to like merge systems, it sounds really easy to do, but how do you actually go about it? And what's the how do you actually navigate and work with finance, work with other leaders so any story that you'd like to share in that post-acquisition integration phase?
Yeah, I mean, often the sales individual makes the integration sound really easy, right? It's so easy to port from one to the other, and you maybe believe them the first one or two times, and after that you kind of get the spidey sense goes off. Um, but in the past, on the enterprise days, we integrated incredibly large, complex systems. So I was back in IBM when we were doing a lot of the AT&T mergers, right? So SBC, Singular, Bell South, so massive, massive systems coming in and emerging from an ordering and workflow delivery, point of view. So you're looking at, well, when I make this change, now there's going to be, X amount of people all around the world who are going to be affected by this change, right? So how are we managing not just the technology change, but, the quality assurance, the testing, the load, the performance, the documentation, the manuals, the resources, everything down the pike. So you're not looking at just the technology problem. You're looking at, okay, well, the ability for that technology to scale, the ability for that technology to be resilient, the ability to understand how to use that technology. When the rep picks up the phone and goes to place an order, do they know how to do that in the new system? Do they know it's going to change? Do they know how things are going to be converted? So you're really looking at, start to migrate from a technology only conversation to a business process conversation, right? And kind of controlling that entire picture. It's challenging. There's a lot of moving pieces. And I think if you take that kind of experience, then you bring that over to the startup or the scale up environment, right? You don't have to be as paranoid, so to speak, right? It's a little bit different from a size point of view, but
Yeah.
you're bringing a lot of that maturity to the table to try to not make the same mistakes or try to prevent mistakes from occurring, which
Mm.
is sort of a double-edged sword. You are trying to prevent things from happening in a negative way, which
Mm.
means your work effort could look more arduous, which could look like you're trying to be annoying, but really you're trying to save them from something bad. Which in some folks love that, they understand it. Others, they need to see that something bad first before they really respect it. So you're working that delicate balance of like, I'm trying to save you by
But
causing you a little more pain. So it's a dance.
one other question I forgot as well, like especially when you talk to CFOs or finance leaders, right? And you look at your entire GTM engine, what are some signals that you think they should be paying attention to? Like when you know something's up, like obviously there's lagging indicators, your revenue, you didn't hit your revenue, that's almost too late, right? Like, but what are
Mhm.
some like signals that you've seen be very helpful?
Yeah, I think, we all have fancy metrics, right? You can go look
Yeah.
up today, what's your top 50 SaaS metrics. They're there and they're great. But usually I see the problems are really more generic, right? It's really talking about just the data is wrong. You don't have the right data or you're not looking at things. Let's look at the struggles in the corporation. So let's say a deal usually takes 30 days to close. This one took 35, 45, 70. Why? Not just saying, oh, someone was on vacation. Well, why was it? Looking at it, was it a product issue? Was it a marketing issue? Was it a contract issue?
Mhm.
Those delays usually signal larger process problems within the entity. And
Mhm.
spending the time to dig into those is really the critical piece, right? So, does it directly affect the numbers? It could, you can have slower ARR or something like that, or other kind of things that are affecting from a deal closure point of view. But working together to really solve that is the key, right? We want to understand why this is happening. not taking the data for what it is, but also understanding the breakdown of it, looking at it by cohort, ensuring that the data is being captured, ensuring that there's a religious nature essentially between, let's say, an event and capturing those leads to bringing them into your CRM, to calling them, to, putting them at the other angle. In finance, not just looking at the end result, right? I think if we look years ago, finance was like the end. So you did your
Yeah.
stuff, you close your quarter, they get you materials. Moving finance as an entire operation, up the stack to be part of that conversation throughout the year, throughout the week, right? Bring them in to be able to get their wisdom at points where change can happen, not where the change happens after the sin was already made, right? So having that partnership allows things to be, I think, sort of like a continual refinement, continual improvement because you're working together. You're not looking at like, okay, the body's already sick. We have to get some medicine. It's like, well, I could tell the body's getting unhealthy. Let's help
Yeah.
it along the way.
Yeah, but that's a really good point. Like, just look at the sales cycles and the deals that are closing on above the average. You know something is up over there. Then something is definitely up that's happened over there as well, right? So that's a really good point. And just to close off as well, right? Like, what do you see the best CFOs adding strategic value to that entire operational cadence, right? Like versus like just purely being on the financial lane, where do you see them be very, very effective and like the CFOs that you worked with?
I think, being approachable, right? Obviously, sometimes you look at ops, finance, legal, we're looked at sort of the,
Yeah, the
I don't want to
know-it-alls.
say that, say again.
The know-it-alls.
Wasn't going to say that, Sid, but the parts of the
Hey,
organization that can make things a
I used
little.
to be around BizOps, man. That's what, I know this very well.
I got it. Trying to not be the organization or part of the organization that makes things slower, kind of, where deals go to die, right? I think having that mindset that we're here to help. We are here to
Yeah,
bring reinforcements. We're here to be part of the conversation. Especially if you look at things like if you're in a recurring revenue type business, looking at the new way of thinking about revenue, the new way of understanding that this is not just an end state, it's the lifeline of the customer, right? Looking at bow tie and other things, trying to understand how this works. Modern CFOs can bring in more understanding of new techniques, helping to train the team on where to focus their attention, where to look at points in the process and to improve things, and really kind of moving to that collaborative finance conversation. Even for example, let's talk about just, as you said, maybe know it all, maybe being critical. Let's say you're looking at, hyperscaler spend, right? Whether you're on Azure, AWS, GCP, whatever it happens to be. How is that spend occurring? What are you looking at? How do you break it down by client? How do you break it down by type of product? Bringing that mathematical lens to it, so to speak, can be used to inform, your DevOps teams, your SRE teams on what changes to make, right? So just by being in the conversation, they can advise, hey, this report should look this way, or we need this data, or you need to tag it this way. Just being there and providing that advice can allow the data, again, go back to data, to be better. So your intelligence can actually provide, real value to the corporation.
makes sense. This is very helpful, Joe. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really did enjoy this conversation, and especially around how finance and operations can actually work together, how you actually set it up beforehand, and real life stories from how like you've worked with great CFOs and what makes them really tick as well. Thank you for taking the time, Joe.
Awesome. Thank you for having me here. It was great, great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.